Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and today we're going to be talking about explicit, systematic, and recursive instruction. You will see these concepts on a lot of teacher certification exams, especially the reading exams, and I want to break them down for you so you can spot them on the test and apply them in your classroom. Let's get started. So one of the things that comes up a lot when I'm looking over the exam specs and the blueprints and things like that is the concept of explicit, systematic, and recursive instruction. Now, this is very prominent in the reading exam. So you're going to see this a lot on the Praxis 5205 and the Praxis 5206. And on the exam, you're going to have to distinguish between and among these different types of processes. Now, the first thing you should know is explicit, systematic, and recursive instruction is very important when teaching reading. So if you see any one of those words in the answer choices, slow down because it's most likely the correct answer. When we teach reading, we want to do it in an explicit, systematic, and recursive way, meaning we are building upon other skills. We're being very explicit in how we address these skills. We're not just, throwing kids into reading instruction and hoping that they get it. That's kind of like the whole language approach, which has been sort of abandoned by a lot of educational researchers. What we want to do is break down words, break down the sounds, look at the codes inside of words, and really help students understand that process. And so in order to do that, we have to be very explicit, systematic, and recursive. So let me break these three down for you really quickly. Explicit instruction. And you're probably already doing this in your classroom. It's just good to know these terms, and then we're better able to apply them later. So explicit instruction is when you are standing in front of the room, perhaps you have a presentation behind you, and you are giving the information. Students are looking up at you, and they are kind of absorbing that information. They might be taking notes, they might be following along, but you are basically in charge of what's happening. And so explicit instruction might be demonstrating something. You might have a word on the board where you're breaking it up into individual sounds. You might be going over the C in words, like when it makes a k sound and when it makes a s sound. And you're being very explicit, and you're showing the students the word, you're breaking it down for them, you're modeling. Modeling is a big part of explicit instruction. You're showing them what to do. Explicit instruction in science instruction would be, let's say, if they're going to be doing a lab and you're going through the steps of the lab before you send them out into their lab groups, right? You have to go through the steps of the lab. You probably have to demonstrate. Science teachers out there know you don't just let students, go into their lab groups and get a hold of the Bunsen burners and just go to town. You've got to show them what to do. So explicit instruction does that. It could be breaking down the steps. It could be in English class. You might have a essay projected on your whiteboard where you are explicitly showing them how to fix sentences, how to write a thesis statement. You're showing students how to do something. Explicit instruction. Now, systematic instruction goes along with explicit instruction. There's just a little nuance here. Systematic is a step-by-step process. So you may be giving systematic instruction while you are giving explicit instruction, and typically that's how it goes. But on the exam, if you see systematic, it typically is a series of steps. So here's an English language arts example. Let's say that you are showing students how to write an essay. You wouldn't just have them write the essay, and you wouldn't just demonstrate how to write an essay. It would be too much, right? So what you would first do is talk about the thesis statement, perhaps show students how to develop a clear and concise thesis statement. Then you might work on some details, outlining, some details you're going to use in order to support that thesis statement. And you might work on that for a couple of days. Once students gain that understanding, you might move into writing some detailed paragraphs and how to construct those. And you might further work on that, refining those paragraphs and making sure they go back to the thesis statement. Once students get a handle on that, probably after a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks, depending on their skill level, you might then move into building the entire essay. Then you might move on to proofing the essay. Notice that it's systematic. We started with a small skill. We got a little bit more in depth, got a little bit more complex. And at the end, they've gained these skills that are kind of intertwined and work together to make this essay. In reading instruction, we do it as well. We start with phonemic awareness, the sounds in words, right? Phonemic and phonological awareness. We don't look at the word yet. We're not writing yet. We are just thinking about the sounds in words. Then we move into phonics, which is a more complex skill where students are looking at a word and they're deciphering the codes in the words to determine what sounds they make. You know, if it's a long A next to a K and an E, the silent E, we're talking about those CVCE words. That's a little more complex than just listening to the sounds in words. Then we move from phonics to fluency and vocabulary, where they're reading longer strings of words, sentences, passages. They're figuring out the vocab. Notice that's a much more complex skill. It's building upon the phonological phonemic awareness, phonics. Then we get into fluency and vocabulary. So it's systematic, moving into higher skills, higher levels. Then we move into comprehension, where they are having to form pictures in their brains using their metacognition. Now we've moved on to just word recognition. We're talking about critical thinking and summarizing and predicting and all of that, much more complex. And then we move into writing, which is the last thing students get. We don't start off writing essays in, elementary school. We start off with the sounds and words. So that's systematic. And of course, we use explicit instruction to do that. We model all of these processes as we go through this system of skills. Now, recursive is very important in reading, writing, really any instruction, math, science, all of it uses recursive. Recursive means we go back and kind of reinforce skills that we've already learned in order to progress through more complex skills. So for example, if we've moved on to phonics, I'm a reading teacher, and we've moved on to phonics of some basic words, right? I might have to go back and revisit some phonological awareness and some phonemic awareness skills in order for students to understand phonics. Because skills build upon other skills, we have to revisit skills in a recursive manner. And it's very, very important when we're teaching anything. Math. If we are going on to algebra, we might need to go back and review some of our multiplication tables. In anything, I used to study martial arts for many, many years. And even with a black belt or advanced classes, we would still go back and do front punch up and down the dojo, right? Over and over and over again, because revisiting those concrete fundamental skills allows us to move on to more complex skills. In writing, same thing. We go back and revisit drafts, fix up our paragraphs, move on to more complex thinking and complex writing. So recursive means we're going back, we're revisiting those skills, understanding those foundations, and then using that to build onto more complex, more critical thinking areas. Now, all three of these particular concepts are on all of the teacher certification exams. And typically, if they are in the answer choice, it's probably the right answer. Although, I don't know what test you're going to get, so I can't say for sure. But if you see the words explicit instruction, systematic instruction, or recursive, slow down. It most likely is the correct answer. Or if you see them in the question stem in the scenario, now you know what that means. Now, of course, beyond just the teacher certification exams, we should be doing this in our classrooms. And a lot of you are just doing this because you're teachers and that's what you do. This is just good old-fashioned teaching. But when we know what these concepts are and when we understand how to apply them appropriately, they really do make for the best practices in the classroom and much better instruction. So be sure you're using that explicit instruction. Modeling is a big part of that. Students need to see you do something. And you know this, right? You may tell them something and think that you've explained it already 100 times. They still don't get it. That's because they need more explicit instruction, modeling. The same thing with classroom management. I've done a lot of videos on this and I'll link them up because a lot of you need help with classroom management. Everybody does. When we do classroom management, we don't just tell students the rules. We don't just expect them to follow the rules, right? We have to show them the rules very explicitly. These are the expectations, I should call them, not rules. These are the expectations. And I might model how to walk into the classroom properly. I might model how to set up my paper for my bell ringer. I might model how to work through the different centers so students can watch me do it. It's very important. Even as adults, we need that modeling. So that explicit, systematic, and of course, recursive instruction is so important in the application of the classroom environment as well. If you're interested in our resources, we have a lot of resources for the Praxis exams. You can just go over to KathleenJasper.com. You can see that we have tons of study guides, online courses, and we also have free webinars. So every week, roughly, I go through and I do webinars for the different tests. They are completely free and come with a mini study guide. You can also check out all of our study guides. We have tons here, and they will help you with the exam. Just head over to KathleenJasper.com for more information. All right, so I hope that clears things up for you regarding explicit, systematic, and recursive instruction. Remember, these are really important things to remember on your teacher certification exam. I wish you luck on your exams and in the classroom. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comments below, and we'll be happy to answer those. And I hope you have an awesome day. Bye.